Hey everyone, welcome back. What are we doing this time? We're going to go back to the past, not to the future. We're not going to go back to the future. We're going back to the past. Actually, we're going to go back to January 1949. Let's have some fun. We're going to do something new here. Let's have some fun with it, but we are going back to the past. Do a little history lesson. All right, welcome back. I'm Dave Guerra, United States Army veteran, 11 Bravo infantryman, and formerly of the United States Army Berlin Brigade. Berlin Brigade. That's right. It was the unit that was in Berlin after the end of World War II and up until when the wall fell and then German unification. So all the time there was always an American presence in the city of Berlin, as there was a British and a French presence in the western side of the city. And the eastern side, or East Berlin, well, that was the Soviet controlled. Remember the Soviet Union? If you don't, crack open a history book and find out, read more about it. The more you know. Okay, so speaking of that. So in 1948 to 1949, there was this, well, Berlin airlift. The blockade, the Berlin blockade. The Soviets said, nope, we don't want anybody coming in or out. We're going to start cutting off supplies by land, by rail. So all supplies into that city, 110 miles into the Soviet zone. At that time it was known as the Soviet zone. And so how was food brought in? How were supplies brought in? The Berlin airlift, again, the Berlin airlift. And during that, it was called Operation VIttles. Operation VIttles, there's the name. And I'll show it over here on camera 2. Oops, it does change up a little bit. But either way, we'll fix that. Operation VIttles, that was the operation that flew in food, material, supplies, medicine, coal to the besieged or beleaguered city of West Berlin, or the divided western sectors, or the three allied sectors. Now, so what does this have to do with today's history lesson? Is a cooking lesson. In today's, what are we cooking? Well, there was a book. It was actually this book right here. Well, it wasn't in this form back then. It was actually printed, and it was it's called, a couple of pictures of stuff happening over at Tempelhof Air Base. It was called the Operation VIttles Cookbook, compiled by the American women in blockaded Berlin, January 1949. Yes, somebody went off and, they digitized this, and then I got a hold of it, and thank you to the individuals that sent this over, and do appreciate it. And guess what? We're going to start reaching back in time to what supplies and the recipes and kind of the mindset and kind of looking at daily life in blockaded Berlin, 1948, 1949. So right away, the first page, and really the first page is kind of the dedication page, and I'm going to read you the dedication. All right, so the dedication, here it is, dedication page. Dedicated to the happy group of wives who attempted to obtain American meals by slaying the dragons of language, old utensils, ovens sans thermometers, conflicting opinions, etc. ad infinitum. And to the many excellent cooks who bore the puzzling variety in the American diet, the endless summers of immer was neu ist. Always something new. Always something new. And you know who signed this? And again, I'll show this. Marjorie Clay. Marjorie Clay, that's right. General Lucius Clay's wife, his spouse. So she was out there in the forefront of all of this. But again, it was a beleaguered city, so things had to happen. So what's cooking in Berlin? That's the next page, and here it is. It's a plethora of options here. We got bread, we got cakes, cookies, pastries, desserts, meats, fish, chicken, vegetables. Then a couple of broken down specialty sections. One's called Military Missions and Governments. And these are from different missions, military affiliated missions in Berlin, in Eastern Germany, or in the Berlin area. Potsdam at that time was in East Germany. So we've got several, and it's going to be interesting. We also have the no time at all. Those are those quick meals, and some miscellaneous meals, and a couple of beverages as well. And we'll be doing a little bit of everything. We're going to be, for the next several episodes, we're going to be doing some of these recipes. We're going to be doing a lot of these recipes. Actually, I'm not going to kid you. There are the page counts. There are at least 96 recipes. We're not going to do all 96 because some of them complement the other content. So just be aware that we're going to be taking a deep dive into the Operation VIttles Cookbook. So let's get ready. And the first one today, is coming from the meat section. The meat section. And it is the beef stroganoff, or stroganoff, but this is Stroganoff or Stroganoff Stragenoff, Stroganoff. And what do we need in that? Real simple. We need a large onion sliced, some butter, around 2 pounds of round steak cut up in strips, some soy sauce, some ketchup, some sour cream, and then flour, water, and mushrooms, and that's going to be the gravy. So we're going to cook all this, and then we're going to serve it with the mushroom sauce and over rice. It's going to be excellent. So you know what? Let's get started. All right, everybody. So here are the ingredients one more time, and as I just finished chopping everything and putting it together with the assistance of Mrs. This Vet Cooks. Thank you very much. And I want to take this opportunity to not just only thank Mrs. This Vet Cooks, but everyone else that watches on YouTube, that follows us on the facebook.com/thisvetcooks. Let's see, on Twitter @thisvetcooks, and on our Instagram page, instagram.com/thisvetcooks. Do want to appreciate you stopping by and joining us and following along. And as I mentioned, just want to reiterate, this recipe is coming from a book compiled on January 1949, basically at the middle of the, or you could look at it as the beginning of the end of the Berlin blockade. And so taking it, let's just look at the mind at the time and all of that situation. Yes, it was a unique situation in history. It was a different time, and because the Soviets blockaded access to Berlin, they basically shut down the roads, they shut down the rail traffic. So supplies getting in and out of into the city were difficult to get in. So that's when the Berlin airlift kicked in. And with that, supplies were being flown in. However, all the supplies that were coming in were not just for the American forces and the British forces, but for all the citizens of Berlin. So you had food, you had medicine, you had fuel, in this case coal, or in most cases it was coal, but you had all that fuel coming in, you had all that food coming in, it had to be distributed among everything. So on the military side, or the U.S. Army of Occupation side, the wives got together and said, hey, let's put together a little something something. And so in this case, yes, we are doing the beef stroganoff, or stroganoff, and this recipe comes from Ruth A. Perryman, Perryman, Ruth A. Perryman. And so thank you, and to the family, if you happen to be watching, you're related to Ruth Perryman, or the soldier that she was married to. Thank you, and well, let's put everything together and let's get going. All right, so here on camera 2, we've got the our one burner going, and we have the pan in here, and let's go ahead and drop in a tablespoon of butter. There we go. And we definitely want to watch this. Don't want it to burn. Obviously, then we have our setting a little too high. But we want the butter to melt and make its way all around the pan. There we go. And yep, there it is on scene 2, or camera 2. And we're going to brown the onions, or we're going to cook, not brown them, we're going to cook the onions until they are clear. So cook onion in butter until clear. So let's go ahead and drop these things. There we go. I know it's a lot of onion, right? That's a large onion. Yeah. So I highly doubt January, December, well, maybe, yeah, no, they would come in, but the onions, I don't think they'd be this big. I think these are more conditioned over time, groomed over time as far as the size. So maybe a large onion back then would be more of half the size of this large onion today. And obviously the varieties probably weren't as plentiful as they are now, as abundant as they are now. So there we go. But it does smell great. And obviously they will cook down. All right, just rechecking our recipe here. We're going to cook the onion in butter until clear. Then we're going to add the meat to brown. So it doesn't say to do anything just yet. No meat, no spices. I guess it just wants it all to sweat away. Again, I get a little closer. So I'm going to pause right here for just a second. All right, folks, here on camera 2, we see that we've added another tablespoon of butter. It kind of came to us in the conversation here. Yes, we're gonna follow the recipe as much as possible. However, there are going to be a couple of things that obviously need to be adjusted. In this case, the size of this onion, it's a large onion. The thing is huge, and look at all of that that's in camera 2 there in the pan. Obviously, as I mentioned, the size is going to be an issue back then as opposed to now. So because of that, we went ahead and added another tablespoon of butter just to help it along. And in the conversation that we had off camera here, it definitely is going to be a situation that maybe that's all they called for was just the one, because then maybe that's all they could spare. That's all they could ration for that meal. So I'm trying to figure this out as I'm looking at these recipes throughout this cookbook. Some of them are very bare bones. So it could just be that that's what they were doing, that they were just trying to get away with the bare minimum to ensure that they had butter for the other meals or something else that was needed later on. Say a cake. Yeah, there's a recipe for cakes in here too. So it's one of those things that we need to consider the time. And if it looks like, oh, well, 1 tablespoon for this large onion, then we will adjust accordingly. So, but for the most part, we're going to try to remain true to the recipe as the way, in this case, Ruth Perryman put it together back in late 48, 1949, early 1949, or January 49. So, cookbook published, oh my, many years ago, 71 years ago. That is, wow. So, just goes to show what situation was going on back then versus what's going on now. And now, same thing. Do a little with a lot. Or do a lot with a little. There we go. Strike that, reverse it. There we go. Do a lot with a little. And these onions have really cooked down. They're starting to get there. They're changing color. They might not get clear all the way, but we're going to get as close to it as possible. Definitely going to want them to be a little more flimsier. All right, so let's speed this up. These onions look like they're about done. They're really, really flimsy, really flopping around. Some of them are starting to brown, so be careful. Let's not get too far. And we're going to go ahead and go with it like this. So, as such, and here we go, adding 2 pounds of round steak cut into strips. So we're going to go ahead and add that. 2 pounds, that's a lot. Now, don't forget, folks, back then, the family count was a little bit higher. And especially in the military, a steady pay, post-war. All right, so now it says we need to add the meat and brown. Add the meat and brown. So once it's brown, then we're going to start adding the ketchup and all of the soy sauce and all of the other stuff. Camera 2 shows us our meat is now brown, not brined, brown. And speaking of salt, if you've been following along, the recipe does not call for salt. We're going to add some salt right now in the form of the ketchup and the soy sauce. 6 tablespoons of ketchup, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 cups of sour cream. So let's dive right in, make it happen. Here goes our ketchup. There's our ketchup, and that's in there. Get it all. There's that. 3 tablespoons of soy sauce. Ooh, that smells good. And 2 cups or 16 ounces of sour cream. And just roll that in there. And we're going to cook slowly until the meat is tender. And there we go. Just mix that in there, get that stuff off the spoon. Excellent. As that is, so let's go ahead. Let's get this going in here. Oh, it smells great. That soy sauce has really changed the flavor, I mean the scent, the aroma texture or profile of this dish, I mean right away. It's a little thick. Don't worry, it'll break down. Now, the next part, like it says, we're going to cook until the meat is tender. And so we keep it. We might need to bring down our temperature just a wee bit. Watch that. Watch it, because you don't want it to start too hot and it starts curdling that, starts cooking that sour cream, or like nasty. So just bring it down a little bit. And also, another discovery we were doing off camera, we were talking about the mushrooms. Now, half a cup of fresh mushrooms is, well, it's not a lot. Doesn't look like a lot. Especially today's modern button mushrooms. Or what are the other ones? What are they called? They just use plain mushrooms. The buttons are the ones in the can. There we go. And that's where we discovered that it could be that transporting mushrooms, fresh mushrooms, is not like potatoes and onions, which are root vegetables. They'll last longer, carrots, things like that. So they would be in a can. They'd be canned. So what are we doing? We're cooking down our mushrooms now before we add them in here. Because in the recipe, it calls for the mushrooms to be added right before we top it over rice. So it's like it wouldn't have any time to cook. And if we did want to cook them, we would have started cooking them around the time that the onions were getting going. So that way they worked with the meat and everything was fine. And because they're in a can, that would be the other source of sodium into the recipe. So, okay, so as you see here on camera 2, I think we've got enough stir. We're going to go ahead and bring that. I brought the temperature down, and we're going to let that cook until the meat's just a little tender. We'll give it a tasty taste in just a bit. So we've stirred it, we've let it simmer, we let it cook slowly here a couple of minutes, and there it is. Now, one thing to note, I did talk about the sodium. However, it's going to be a taste thing. It's going to be something to taste. So with that being said, let's get going here. So our next step is to mix some flour and water, and there it is. And then we're gonna mix it again because it's starting to separate. So be careful there. And we're gonna mix that in. Again, don't forget, these are different times. I know some recipes you might want to just do a little water and cornstarch to thicken things up. But in this case, a little is going to go a long way. And oh wow, almost instantly you see it start to thicken. But it's still a little watery. And don't worry about that, because we're about to add the mushrooms. Because that's it. Mix flour and water, add together. 1 tablespoon of water, 2 tablespoons of water, 1 tablespoon of flour. And so everything else aside from the using all of those. And now we're going to add our mushrooms. And there they are. Oh wow, yeah, things are really starting to thicken up, and we add that in there. And I'm using this little one. I'm going to use the bigger one. Hopefully I don't spill over the top. So we used a little bit more mushrooms. We love mushrooms here. And so we went a little further. But I think we are good to go here. There it is. It's kind of not a dark brown, a light brown on the verge of basically a little tinge of orange, and that's coming from the ketchup, the red of the ketchup. And so we'll let it cook here a little bit. Just give it a stir to make sure we get all that flour going in there. It looks, smells very interesting. It does smell like a beef stroganoff. Now, I did mention we're going to do this over rice. Don't forget, back then in 1949, Berlin, blockaded Berlin. Noodles were more of what's it called? Not a commodity. They were more a luxury. Yes, thank you, a luxury. And the rice, though, however, it was packed in those big 50, 75 pound bags. So that'd be a little bit easier to get at. So we're going to do it over white rice. Obviously, some egg noodles would be excellent too, as well. Whatever works for you. But again, we're sticking as close to the recipe as possible. So let's get this stuff all plated up. There it is on camera 2, the beef stroganoff. Stroganoff, beef stroganoff from the Berlin Blockade Cookbook, Operation VIttles Cookbook. Again, thank you to the individual that made this available. And again, thank you for sharing this great piece of history. And I am honored to be able to take the time to do this and share this with everyone. This is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of looking back, a lot of understanding what was going on during that time, and see some things that are happening right now and how that all mashes up. With that being said, though, they were different times, they were difficult times just like they are now, and in between there have been plenty of those. And for folks, again, those of you that need to make that call, make the call. The Veteran Crisis Line, you find yourself in a unique situation, make the call, 1-800-273-8255. Press the number 1 for veterans. And when that automated attendant again, 1-800-273-8255. Press the number 1, please, and make the call. Because we want you to stick around, watch the other shows. The rest of these shows, we got some great stuff coming up. A lot of fun stuff, too. It's not all serious. It's not all dinner. It's some seriously fun stuff. Alrighty, so as I mentioned here on camera 2, there it is. Let's go ahead. And there's the rice that's just nicely presented. And got a little gravy there, a little meat. A little meat in the rice. Oh, a little bit too much on the onion there. That's like the downside of the onion, though. Because it's long. Oops, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's the deal. I can understand, and it's finger licking good, and it's fantastic. It's flavorful. The meat, and you would think the ketchup and the vinegar with the ketchup would kind of like, hey, where is this? It works. It really, truly works. So we've added everything else, and of course, on the back end, if you want to salt and pepper to your taste, by all means, add a little pepper, a little salt, whatever works for you. Tabasco sauce looks like it'll work here too. But thank you for joining us on this first episode of the Operation VIttles Cookbook series that we're starting. And I want to thank everyone for watching again. Thank you. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and like and comment below. And we'll get into it. And the recipe will be down below. Real simple recipe, real nice, very awesome. And again, thank you very much. I'm Dave Guerra, and This Vet Cooks.